you with us as well. And thank you so much at home for tuning into the show tonight. We've put together what I hope you will find to be an insightful and compelling view of the child welfare system and related issues that improve our community. So get ready, because tonight our special guest is a very special person, attorney Jey Rajaraman, who is going to talk about the critical period before a petition is filed, when sort of the axe can fall on either side in the child welfare world, of whether removing a child or allowing that same child to remain with their biological family. So you're not going to want to miss 1 second of that. Also, tonight, it's still Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and in my final words tonight, we're going to talk about the grooming process. Apparently, there is a conditioning period. They use that same word when they talk about how, pervs condition a young person. Well, the same is true when it comes to domestic abuse. And there's a chance that during this period, you can actually get out before it's too late. But you have to recognize the signs. So stay with me right to the end of the show tonight. And if you need assistance or want to talk to someone about domestic violence, call 1-866-331-9474 to speak with a trained peer advocate. So everybody get ready for 52 minutes of reality, and hopefully when it's over, you'll be a little richer for having done so. And stay with Hamilton Radio all night long for a combination of great music and talk. Rome Brothers Following Me, talking sports, big day in the NFL yesterday. Be sure to stick around for that. Now, please take a moment, and if you're looking at us on Facebook, hit that share button or email your whole address book and tell them to go to hamiltonradio.net channel 2. Tell everyone in your world what we're talking about tonight, because what you're going to hear applies to every geographic region, including where you live, and it needs to be shared. Next week, October 19th, Angela Quijada Banks, author of Black Foster Youth Handbook, will be here to talk about her experiences in the system, and on and on. And I think we just lost Facebook, or at least the visual part of Facebook, Ruben. So there we go. It looks like we're back. And Angela Quijada Banks will be here next week talking about her experiences in the system, and on and on and on. One great show after another. So don't keep this private to yourself. Help us share it. Tell your friends. There's a generation of youth out there being forgotten, and caring people can't sit still while that happens. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 6 p.m. for our unfiltered look at the child welfare system. This is where you come to get the whole truth. And I promise, what you will hear tonight cannot be found on the nightly news. Since we're live, you can write to us during the show in the comments field on Facebook, or call in if you want to join the conversation. Be brave. Don't be afraid. Be a part of the show. 609-807-2492 is the number for that. Remember, I say this at the top of every show. Sometimes the things that we talk about can be triggers. So if you're in crisis, don't hesitate to call a free mental health hotline. These resources are available to anyone at any time and exist to help you connect with the right support help when you need it. If you're thinking about harming yourself, please don't hesitate to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Want to remind my friends in New Jersey about the Bridges to Employment program. If you or someone you know is currently in foster care or aged out up to age 24, doesn't have a job, not in school, this is a perfect program for you. Anywhere in the state of New Jersey, we'll provide all the supports you need to get your high school equivalency if you need it, and get you moving toward a career where you can live independently. This is a phenomenal program. It's all virtual, so you can join us from anywhere in the state. And not only is it all free, but you can actually earn up to $1,000 in incentives as you progress on your journey to success. That's a different phone number for that. It's 609-306-0821 for more information, or email to me at greg@ageoutangels.org, or hit me up in the comments field on Facebook, or private message me. Million ways to get in touch with me if that's the right program for you. Before we get to our guest, I just wanted to call your attention to an opinion piece I found on The Hill by Carissa Hunsinger. And the title of the piece is "Removing Children from Their Parents Doesn't Just Happen at the Border." U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency has now ended its policy of separating minors from their parents at the border. And that's a move that a majority of Americans, even the ones who want stronger border security, support. That's because Americans are seemingly united in the belief that there's an innate sanctity to the nuclear family. The bonds between parents and children cannot be replicated and should only be severed in the most severe of circumstances. Now, while the outrage persists over family separations at the border, the government is still separating families here at home. More than 250,000 American children are removed from their homes and their parents each year by the child welfare system. Some of these separations are truly necessary, but the grounds for removal are not always clear-cut. Of all American children within the foster care system, more than 70% were removed due to neglect. In some cases, a neglect finding may indicate substantial harm to a child, but more often it simply indicates underlying issues like poverty, substance abuse, or untreated mental illness. Symptoms associated with poverty, like inadequate housing or insufficient childcare, are too often conflated with maltreatment. In 2017, 10% of children were removed for inadequate housing, a number comparable or exceeding removal rates for physical or sexual abuse, respectively. In fact, since 2009, removals based on inadequate housing have been steadily increasing. According to Emma Ketteringham, Managing Director of the Family Defense Practice at Bronx Defenders in New York, Child Protective Services has not been equipped to address the daily manifestations of economic and racial inequality. Instead, it is designed to treat structural failings as the personal flaws of low-income parents. And minority children are more often the victims of this overzealousness. The director of Allegheny County's Office of Data Analysis, Research and Evaluation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, admitted the department's case review process definitely oversamples the poor. And nationally, African American children are represented in foster care at a 1.8 times their rate in the general population. When children are removed from their parents, they can suffer psychological and physical effects from disrupted attachment to their biological parents, from the emotional disruption of being away from home, and from the difficult transition to foster care. The sense of loss from being separated from a parent can stunt development and lead to behavioral problems. Removals can cause a feeling of instability, loss of control, and fear. For parents, removal of a child can exacerbate mental illness and cause mental distress. In the same way, many Americans oppose separating migrant children from their families at the border, we must also oppose a child protective system that is overly adversarial in its approach towards struggling parents. Removing children from their families for anything less than imminent danger is nothing more than punishment for the crime of being poor. And on that happy note, let me welcome my guest, Jey Rajaraman. Jey is Chief Counsel, at least this is what it says on your LinkedIn page. You are Chief Counsel of the Family Representation Project for Legal Services of New Jersey. Welcome to the show, Jey.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you for that introduction and the summary of pretty much everything I'm going to say. I think you covered all my points, so thank you.
No, it's such a pleasure having you here because I didn't want to talk statistics with you because you live this every day. I want to understand the feelings and the emotion. I try to put myself in the position of a parent who has just had someone come into their home who is about to make a decision as to whether or not to remove their children. And I can't get there. What do parents tell you that they're feeling when that moment occurs?
It's sheer terror and trauma. It's horrifying. It's a moment of disbelief that someone's actually physically taking your children away from you. Unfortunately, I have observed 2 physical separations myself, once in court where a mother tested positive and the judge she brought her children to court in hoping to prevent a removal. And she brought her kids into court and the judge found because she tested positive for an illegal substance that her children would be taken. And it took about 3 or 4 sheriff's officers to physically remove her 3 small girls from her arms. They were all clutching.
Oh my God.
It was horrific. And I still think about that. That was over 10 years ago. And I felt helpless. I felt useless. I thought, what kind of attorney am I to allow this to happen? In that case, we did get our girls back. It took a while, but I think about that day. I think about that day often, almost every day. Maybe that's why I still do this work over 15 years. And in the other case I observed was at school, where the division was trying to remove an older child from a parent-teacher meeting, and it was occurring at school. And that child ran out of the school, and they had to call the police to find this child. That level of intensity to try to find him. And I keep thinking, for what? Why was this happening? And what could I do to prevent this? And what more can I do to expedite the reunification? And in both cases, I felt and argued throughout their cases that this wasn't neglect. Yes, there was substance use. And in the other case, there was issues with education, but there were no safety concerns with the children. The children were safe at home. They were safe with their mother. So it was really traumatic to watch and experience, but it drives me. And I think about those cases, like I said, every day.
I can imagine. Now, when a judge is faced with a situation like that, where the parent tested positive, right? Does he have any leeway in that, or is that just sort of automatic? You test positive, the law says children are taken away.
Arguably, there is leeway, and the judge is permitted to not fine for removal. And there's case law where actually Supreme Court case law that says that drug use alone is not enough to terminate or be a finding of abuse and neglect. And we have excellent case law and strong statutes, but we run into the moment of gut decisions, unfortunately, or a concern of use over how do you serve the case or prevent the removal. There's been a transition in focus and pressure to try to to prevent removals, because now, as you described quite eloquently before, and what's been reported on is that it's a known trauma. We know it physically, emotionally damages children to be taken from their parents. And we also know that stranger foster care may result in 3 or 4 placements. You may age out, as you well know, and you discuss on your show weekly, the traumas of foster care and the problems of foster care and the likelihood of success or issues with homelessness and employment. These are things that these children face when they enter foster care. And we also know it's about 50% chance once they're removed that they may be returned, or it heads towards termination. That might result in adoption, but that's pretty severe. So I always look at how do we keep this family stabilized and prevent that removal as often as possible, because we know that children do well. They can thrive with their families. They can be safe with their parents, especially when we know the issues are not imminent danger or physical or sexual abuse, as the data has shown us.
So right, and so we're sort of splitting this hair down a side of imminent danger and not imminent danger. And so what we seem to be saying is there can be issues of drug abuse, but not necessarily coincide with imminent danger for the young people. Is that a fair assessment? Right.
The statute's there to protect children from safety risks. They have to be safe. And that could include, a parent who's actively using in the home. There's absolutely facts that would result in a need for a separation with active use, not in treatment, dangerous behavior. And that is something, you can be explored and argued at court. But what we know from national stats, and New Jersey reflects this, is that the majority of cases involved with the division, DCPP, are identified as neglect. And when you unpack neglect, what you learn more is that they're linked to poverty issues, such as lack of housing, unstable housing, lack of access to welfare and benefits, educational issues, domestic violence, immigration status, mental health. These are things that with intervention and support, we could assist those families without removal. And what we also learn, as we were talking about, once a removal occurs due to federal and state requirements, there's a clock ticking, right? There's a clock that starts where if that child is not returned within a certain amount of time, you're now looking at termination of parental rights. And I'm sure your audience and you've heard, termination of parental rights is the death penalty for these families. There's no open adoption in New Jersey. You're losing not only connection to your parents, you're losing connections to other kin, access to services to those individuals. And for many children, it's a legal fiction. We have many families that still connect post-adoption or post-termination because of the need, the looking for their initial chapter, their first chapter. We have kin and children looking for each other. So it's really looking at the reality of these cases, knowing that the majority of cases involve neglect, and then you unpack that and you learn that it's poverty issues. And then we learn that children are traumatized by separation and they want to reconnect and be with family and kin and their family of origin. So why are we doing this? Why can't we focus on family first and prevention instead of going this route?
Absolutely. And I just want to reiterate that one point, which is that it is true that there are circumstances where children do need to be removed from their home. We're not saying that removal from home is bad as an absolute. What you're saying is that if you look at the aggregate cases that are defined as neglect, within that group, you will find cases where the children are not necessarily in imminent danger.
Right, that's correct. And just to underscore that is that the right to be a family, to have children and parents remain together is constitutionally protected. It's so much so that you have a right to a public defender, a right to counsel in these cases. And there's very few cases that are that exist that way. So you have a right to counsel, and and the priority and the primary function of the case law and statutes, the laws, require reunification. So the whole system is trying to reunify this family. If you are even removing, even in those cases, you're always questioning, why did that removal occur? You're always trying to go back to those parents, the family of origin, to protect that child, because that's what's deemed to be in the best interest of that child. So it's not even post-removal, even if the initial reason it existed, the whole system is meant to try to keep this family whole if possible. And I see that time and time again. And the work that we're trying to do as a system, and even the agency and the court system now, is really challenge that and explore that and reduce the numbers of removals, which has been happening, which is great. That's a great result and outcome. And the numbers show that there. And as the numbers go down, there's not been an increase of calls. There's not an increase of abuse and neglect findings. It just shows that families can remain together safely. And what makes that happen? What makes that possible is what we're asking to do.
Absolutely. It didn't become whack-a-mole like it pops up bad somewhere else. It's just better for everyone since you've been doing this. I do have to take 1 second, do a little housekeeping here with a big shout out to Paul Sansone, Dixon, Neptune, New Jersey, and the new Sansone Jr.'s Windsor Nissan 590 US 130 in East Windsor, New Jersey. Paul, as you may recall, is one of our favorite people here on the Age Out Angels Radio Hour because he actually gave a car to one of our foster alumna in need. So if you're looking for a car and you're anywhere near the Neptune or East Windsor, New Jersey areas, please check him out and tell him that you heard about him right here on the Age Out Angels Radio Hour. And whenever you can, remember to support the businesses who support the people. Visit Sansone Jr. on Route 66 in Neptune and the new Sansone Jr.'s Windsor Nissan 590 US 130 in East Windsor, New Jersey, and tell them we sent you. If you just joined us, I'm speaking with Jey Rajaraman, Esquire, Chief Counsel of the Family Representation Project for Legal Services of New Jersey. Jey, how did you get involved in this? Did you always want to be a lawyer?
No, no. I've always wanted to do public interest. And so I think since I was little, in some way, some form, some type of job of service, and it varied throughout the years. And then law school happened, and it was great. And I had the benefit of clerking for an incredible judge in Essex County, Judge Costello. And she was an incredible mentor, still is. And she said I was, I had public defender, on my forehead or
really?
wrist. And that's where I started. I started at the public defender's office. And at this point, this was around 2004, 2005, where we, as there's a lawsuit in New Jersey. The Child Protection Agency was sued, and it resulted out of that lawsuit, and some of the conditions was the creation of an office of the public defender's office. So they were hiring, and I lucked out and got a position representing parents. And I never looked back. I've been representing parents since then for close to 15 years.
It's just funny the way you say law school happened. It's kind of like you were on your way to the gym, but the map got turned around.
It sort of felt like that. I had different ideas, and then applied to a couple law schools, and it ended up bringing me back to New Jersey. I was in college in Massachusetts, and then came to New Jersey, where my family, I grew up in New Jersey, and to be near my parents and my family here. So it seemed to work out.
Well, we're certainly glad you're doing what you're doing. Now, let's dig in a little bit deeper now. People come to a family's house, and they could be because they have to investigate every case, right? If a report is made, I could get someone sent to your house, right? I could make a phone call, and I could say that Jey, I heard her saying abusive things to her kid. Or her kids are always out playing in the street. They shouldn't be. Anyway, they'd have to come and investigate you, right?
Right. The statute, the reporting requirement in New Jersey is that we're all mandatory reporters, which is not every state. So you often hear I'm a social worker or I'm a teacher, I have to call. But in fact, every individual in New Jersey is deemed a mandatory reporter. And that means that if you have reasonable cause to believe, if you have the belief that a child's being abused, neglected by their guardian, caretaker, parent, you're required to call the division and the child abuse hotline. And they assess, based on what's being reported, if that's being coded as a call to be investigated. And that changes. You can look at their data and their numbers, but the majority of calls, if there is a concern, they're required to go out and investigate.
Okay, so that could be one person, or it could be more than one people, depending on the nature of the complaint, right?
Right, exactly. The referral, if it describes something violent or drug use, right, that may include or involve more than one caseworker or the emergent caseworker out on call, correct?
Okay, and then once those investigators are there is a decision that's made kind of on the spot of whether or not to remove the kids or to not remove them. It's black and white, right?
Right. It's depending on what the allegations are, the hope again is not to remove. And so even if the allegations are lack of housing, which, if the landlord calls and says, look, I'm about to evict and she has children, she's going to be on the streets. The agency is investigating, they have to do something called reasonable efforts. They should try to prevent. So that's part of their investigation is, can they keep this family together, look at the concerns, and there's different levels of intervention. So as many of your viewers may know, the majority of cases that are opened with the agency don't result in removal and separation, which is a good thing, but they open up cases. They do open up cases to investigate, to assist that family, and that's the largest number of their cases. But right, those small numbers where if they feel there's imminent danger and the child's not safe, they are permitted by law to actually remove first before going to court and take that child into their custody and then file a complaint to justify that removal within 2 days after that removal.
Okay, so let's say they remove a child, then they have 2 days to file a complaint. Now, is a complaint what is referred to when they say file a petition, or is that different?
No, that's the same thing. That's the same thing. Yes.
Okay. So in that time, in that 2 days between when a child may be removed or may not be removed, but a complaint could still get filed, right?
Right. So the agency also could file a complaint if they feel like there's not imminent danger, but they feel, for example, the parent needs to be ordered to do services, or the parent is not working with them and they feel they want to comply with, say, a drug test or a psychological evaluation.
Mhm.
But children seem safe. Like the kids are happy, they're in their home. There's, no reason to actually physically take the kids, but they feel there's a concern. They may file a petition or a complaint to the court to either request for removal, or they can ask for care and supervision. So the child remains at home, but the parent will be ordered to work with the agency and comply with court orders and provisions. At any point, just to the parent defense attorney and me, parent can always challenge, they can challenge, say, no, I know who called. It's my mean landlord and they hate me. And I'm not going to get evicted. And it's, I don't want to work with them and I'm not going to let you in my house, so I'm not going to respond to you because it's harassment, or it's my ex-boyfriend. My ex-boyfriend always calls whenever I don't call him back. And parents may say, I'm not going to work with you. And then it's up to the agency to sort of gather the information, facts, and say, oh yeah, this boyfriend calls every month, third week of the month, and we actually do believe her. We're not going to file. We just want to make sure, because we're obligated and the allegations and the referrals were so serious, we have to check in and make sure you're okay.
Right.
And so each agent, every office, there's different ways that they can handle it. The division is much better prepared and can explain that. But those are issues that come up often. And it's whether or not they need to go to court or not. And sometimes agency will look for the court, say, look, let's see if the court feels this is imminent and it's dangerous, and may file to seek a decision from the court. And that happens also.
So here's the kicker in that 2 day space there, like, you've just come to my house, you've just taken my kids away. I'm basically, numb, petrified. I don't even understand what just happened to me. What I know is my whole life just got turned upside down. That's, the emotion that I assume I'd be feeling in that situation. Does the last person out the door say, oh, by the way, here's a card for your legal representation. You should call this number?
So it varies, but they often will get a letter called a 5A, where you actually will be assigned a public defender at that initial hearing. And the hope is that they'll connect with their public defender or legal services. Our office is happy to get a referral call. We actually hope, as I know we're going to talk about, hope that we'll get in even before, during the investigation period, because sometimes if there's not that immediate harm, the investigation can continue for many days, even over a month. And we hope to intervene and support that client. But in those 2 days that we're talking about, where they're waiting for the court hearing, sometimes it could be the next day, they should get information about the public defender, even if they've not been financially approved. And the public defender has a poverty level for if they qualify for their services. But even which is a credit to the public defender's office, on that initial hearing, there will be a public defender appearing with that parent. It's up to the parent. The parent can find other counsel. That's how they reach out to legal services often. Or they may find an attorney they know in the family. That happens, may happen. Or if they can't afford someone, they may try to get a private attorney to appear with them at that first day. But absolutely, when we get those calls and we decide to take those cases that first day, it's overwhelming. They get a packet. That's the complaint. It's many pages. It's overwhelming. They lost their child. They can't really process it. They're scared where their child is if it's not with family. They don't understand their rights. They feel like, they're endangered, the child, if they don't know where they are. They have heard about children being abused in foster care, and I've had clients who've experienced it. So this is what's happening. They also feel like, they didn't get to take their favorite teddy bear. Do they know how to brush their hair? They don't have their favorite breakfast foods. Like, that's the level of parenting struggle that they're feeling instantly. And also, if they did struggle with addiction or mental health, they've lost everything. They feel defeated. Sometimes we've had parents say, maybe they're right, maybe I shouldn't fight, maybe I'm not good enough to be their parent. It's a lot. It's a lot to, as an attorney, and we have social workers, we have a multidisciplinary model at Legal Services. We're all on deck trying to support that parent to have them fight, and we often do have parents who are ready to go also. They're like, I want my day in court. I need to get my kids back day one, which is really hard to do. It's hard to overcome that removal legally in court, but we fight. At Legal Services, we challenge, especially if it's a poverty issue, we will challenge that removal.
Well, when they get the opportunity to have a public defender, and this public defender, I'm assuming, is as overworked as every other public defender, gets this huge case file, probably on the morning of the hearing.
Right. When I was there, because it's imminent, right? It's an emergent filing, so you often get the complaint. You're supposed to get it as early as possible within that span, the 2-day span. But yes, I can't speak for the public defenders, but when I was there many years ago, we would get handed a complaint the day of, and you're meeting with your client at the courthouse the first time. You try to reach out to them before. You try to do as much prep work to challenge it and advocate for the client and get those kids back home, or at least start the groundwork and the foundation to try to get that child back home. If I am connected to a client even hours before, my take is, even without the complaint, and I decide to represent that parent, I believe the parent, I go in still challenging and objecting to what's being said and trying to really show that the removal was not justified and really the kids can be returned safely today. That's my goal on those dates.
Well, I'm trying to draw the distinction, though, between the public defender and between the representation from Legal Services of New Jersey, because you're essentially doing the same job, correct?
Right. So, yes, we represent the public, similar to the public defender's parents in these cases. We also take on kin, where grandmas and aunts and uncles will call. And we work very closely with the public defenders, actually. And to give them full credit, they take the majority of the cases. They're hired and staff and were created to do this work. So they're really committed and they're dedicated to this. I've seen incredible public defender work. The difference between our model is that we actually have social workers. We believe we follow the National American Bar Association model of having social workers. And we're the first office in New Jersey that has a parent ally. So we have a parent that actually has gone through this system where her children were taken from her 3 children. Her name's Aisha. And she fought against termination of parental rights. So she had her kids removed from her for well over 2 years. And she was able to get her kids back. And she had to go to termination trial twice and got her children back. So she's an incredible asset. And so credit to our director and the commitment of Legal Services and of where we've been around for 50 years. I've not been there for 50 years, but our director has been close to 50 years and created the office. And he sees this as a civil justice movement. He calls this as an equity, and I feel the same. I know that as we talk about this work, the majority of these families qualify for the public defender's office and they qualify for Legal Services. So we know that the families involved in the system are impoverished, right? They're living below the general means of families in New Jersey. And as you identified earlier, we also know that we have a racial disparity and disproportionality problem in New Jersey. So what does that mean as to numbers? Depending on which county you're in, it's 3 to 4 times more likely that an African-American child will be removed than a Caucasian child, a white child. So people of color are largely more affected. So they'll be removed. They'll remain in the system, foster care system, for longer. It's harder to have a reunification for those children. They're less likely to be placed with kin. Numbers have improved to give credit where it's due, but it's a problem. It's a problem in New Jersey. And so that's why I love doing this work. I have been doing this close to 15 years, and I can think of one or two cases where it was maybe an allegation of something pretty severe. But for the most part, it's been a poverty issue, and I've seen the racial implications. I've seen the bias come through. I've had clients tell me the bias and prejudice they face, not only within the child welfare system, but many government and state systems, where there are struggles with housing and welfare and the education system that all impact whether their child remains with them or how they get their child back. And so it's been critical to do this work. It's critical to challenge the way we think of the child welfare system. Are we really serving these families? Are we really protecting these children? And as I said, once a child enters the foster care system, it's a different ballgame, because the federal statute and the state statute and case law on the environment changes. It becomes a focus on, can I safely get my kid back? Even though all the burdens on the agency to show that the children should be removed. But when we walk into the court system, the parent is identified as a defendant. And they're usually a single Black poor mother trying to argue that she's worthy of parenting this child, right? Because of her inability to pay rent, or if she left her child at home because she can find a daycare trying to look for employment, or struggling to access healthcare, or she gets her child late to school every day because she's working. She has several children. These are the issues. These are real life issues. They're complicated, they're challenging, they're difficult, but there's not abuse, there's not neglect. This is a family that may need assistance or need support, but they're loving, really well-meaning parents. And these children want to remain with their families. They're not shopping. They're not like, I don't want to be in this one bedroom with my mom. They only want to be in this one bedroom with their mom, whatever that might look like. And we just have to challenge the way we impose these really high standards on impoverished families, these realities for our families here. It's just unfair. We ask so much once we start to intervene and interview, to look at our families, to expect them to provide a really upper middle class Western ideal. And it's just not reality. It's not true. And many of us didn't grow up that way. I didn't grow up that way. And so I think when we're looking to sort of serve, we should be asking, how do we keep these families together when we knock on their doors? And not to confuse poverty with neglect, and not to try to provide every intervention support from the get-go when we get that phone call. I know we can't control the phone calls. Maybe there should be better education. But once we get the phone call, what do we do? What's our reaction? And I go in, once I get the call or I start to work with the family, the parent's my boss. I listen to them. I let them lead. I listen to how much they love their child and how much they want their child back. Or if it's a prevention case, which has now been the most incredible work I've been doing the last 2 years, had to really keep that family whole, because that's where the real work is. And the partnership we've had with the division in the last 2 years has been incredible to keep families whole and stabilized and not enter the foster care system.
When we talk about prevention, we're talking about a situation that needs some kind of supports, yes? And so the idea of prevention is to provide those supports to keep the family whole. Is that where prevention lives?
Right. So and that's a really good question, Greg, because prevention's used two different ways. Often it's deemed as prevention of abuse and neglect, or prevention of entering the child welfare system. So we actually, at Legal Services, we say prevention or pre-petition work. So we're all on track in the state. The goal is to keep this family together. And so what are the needs and services? Like I said, lives are challenging, and needing assistance with rent, or trying to find housing that's more affordable or safe, where there's no lead poisoning or bed bugs. These are things that can't be controlled by the individual. And we have, as we talked about earlier, there's such issues with multi-generational poverty and structural and systematic racism that an individual can overcome that on our own, right? We can't impose her to figure out how to solve the housing crisis in her individual housing case. And we seem to forget that. The system seems to forget that it's not just her that's losing housing or unable to pay rent, or during this time of COVID, not able to access healthcare or employment benefits. There's a lot of people who are struggling with this. And because for whatever reason, the lens of the child welfare system lands on her, she's asked to do more or solve this crisis, right? And is expected to understand and solve this. And as social workers and lawyers, we need to understand that and not impose these high, absurd standards, right? But really just understand that what can we serve and help? And we know, we understand that not you can continue to pay for housing forever. There's difficult decisions. What we've done in this program and working with DCPP in the last 2 years is that when we receive a referral, which has been incredible, we've been getting referrals directly from the agency. When they call us and say, look, we don't want to remove, this is not a removal case, but they're struggling with an eviction, or they were just denied benefits, or they're about to lose their housing voucher. And these are the allegations, these are the concerns. And we're so grateful for those calls. And we work together to try to problem solve and identify the issue as quickly as possible. So we get a referral, and within 24 hours, we work with that parent with an intake, we sign an attorney, and then whatever other issues, we have other attorneys and legal services in New Jersey within our office or statewide to sort of assist with that family to try to prevent that eviction or find better housing. And we work with the agency sort of to assist and support that family. And it's been the best work because I'm working with these caseworkers who are just as committed as my staff, as our office is, to serve that family, to work with that family. And there's no timeline. So even if there's mental health or addiction issues, we don't have the pressures of, you need to get this done. We're working on the family's timeline to really support and stabilize them. And of course, there's always issues, that arrive, but it's much healthier and supportive and strength-based. It's looking at the family's strengths versus the court system's strengths or what needs to be, processed. And it's incredible. And we've had over 200 referrals. Majority of these referrals have been from Essex County. And I have to give them a shout out because they've been incredible. They're incredible caseworkers. Their area director, Dave Sims, has been committed to this because he wants families to remain safely together and just access these legal issues effectively. And that's the benefit. So many times these families will be facing a legal issue that the division can't represent them at landlord-tenant court or a Section 8 denial or welfare denial, but we can. That's what we do at Legal Services. If they need a final restraining order, we have domestic violence attorneys. We have social workers who are trained in entitlements and benefits work. We can access and challenge their education denial of an IEP, or if they're not getting the psychiatric or psychological services for their child that's being challenged, right? These are things that we do because we have attorneys. So it's the benefit of having an attorney pre-petition, so there's nothing's been filed, the linkage with the actual agency itself, and then advocating together in these ancillary legal services to keep this family stabilized. And we're happy for that we're not having removals because we're advocating for them.
Absolutely. I think, the moral of the story seems to be, if you find yourself in this situation, the best thing you can do for yourself is just to get online to lsnj.org, right?
Absolutely. On that website, we have intake information, the hotline, and we absolutely want you to call. And there is a family representation project. So if you have a child welfare DCPP involvement, we're happy to link and work with you even without a referral. That's what we've been doing for over 50 years.
Wonderful. Again, that's LSNJ, the letters LSNJ.org to do that. And quickly, we have 30 seconds, but Carol Jones has been listening to the whole show, and she loves you, by the way. And but asked the important question: what about marijuana? Is marijuana use a reason to remove a child?
So there's not clear statutory language or case law, but as I said before, the drug use alone is not enough. And in many cases, marijuana use is not. There's not, again, a per se clear law that says marijuana is never a reason to remove or not. It's use and action. So if a parent is so incapable of parenting because of use, whatever that drug use may factor into something. So it's very fact-based. There's no, not to avoid or not answer Carol's question, but there isn't a clear answer. But I do want to say that drug use alone is not a reason to remove or terminate. And those cases actually dealt with cocaine and heroin. So what the point would be is, what is the behavior? What's keeping the child unsafe? What's the imminent danger is what we go back to.
Absolutely. Now, I did want to say a few things in my final words tonight. I'm so glad you were able to join us, Jey. And we're going to say that website one more time before we go so that people know. The smart thing to do is to get in touch with you as quickly as possible. But I did want to talk to our audience a little bit about this interesting topic here, how domestic abusers groom and isolate their victims. This is so insidious. Domestic abusers often entrap their future victims with intense romance. Domestic abusers will begin violent and controlling relationships with overwhelming attention, sweet words, gifts that make future victims close their eyes to the red flags indicating potential abuse. They'll come on strong. Intense romance can be a form of grooming, a predatory tactic that is meant to build a deep emotional connection. Abusers know exactly what they are doing. Sarah was just 22 when she met 30-year-old Sam. Within 2 weeks, Sam had moved into her apartment, put his name on her bank account, and claimed her every second when she was not at work. Sam asked about her most intimate experiences, secrets, and dreams, and accompanied Sarah whenever she went out. At first, Sarah was elated. No man had ever loved her this intensely. He put away their phones when they were together so they could concentrate on each other. He pushed her to skip events at work and with friends, saying the relationship was the priority. He made exciting alternative plans for the holidays so she missed her family gatherings. Sam asked Sarah for access to all of her social media accounts as a sign of trust. When Sarah objected, Sam accused her of lacking commitment and became sullen. He classified all her attempts at privacy or independence as signs that she did not love him. Sarah gave in. It was easier than fighting, and she desperately wanted to preserve the purity of their love. Sam had groomed Sarah into isolation, and isolation made her vulnerable to further coercive control. Next step, this doesn't stop there. Next step is intimidation. Romantic gestures can abruptly turn into intimidation. Abusers typically blame their partners for growing tensions. Victims will work hard to appease the abuser, trying to keep themselves safe and get back to that early glow. After a romantic dinner one evening, Steve began kissing and taking off the clothes of his boyfriend, Derek. Derek kissed him back, but said he did not want to have sex. Steve grabbed him hard by both arms and stared into his face threateningly. For the first time, Derek felt afraid of Steve, who was bigger and stronger than he. At that moment, Derek understood that saying no to sex was not really an option. To keep the peace, Derek never again directly refused to do what Steve asked of him sexually. Derek felt intimidated throughout the remainder of the relationship, but tried to avoid thinking about it. See, from initially making their partners feel loved unconditionally and like they can do no wrong, abusers then make their partners work hard to please them, blaming and acting hostile when they do not get their way. And then that's not all. Like, you'd think that'd be enough, right? But then there's grooming the community. Abusers often groom friends, family, and others to overlook signs of abuse and actually cut ties with the victim. They strategically act charming and helpful so people cannot imagine the cruel acts occurring behind closed doors. Iris described how Dave would mow their neighbors' lawns, play the organ at church, coach children's sports teams. No one believed Iris when she tried to describe how he treated her and the children when they were home alone. Sometimes abusers groom the community by ruining their partner's reputation. This can be overt or subtle. Letitia said she lost her friend soon after getting together with her husband because of the stories he made up or twisted to make her sound incompetent, lazy, and crazy. Mike called Lisa's friends and asked them to let him know if she did anything peculiar, subtly indicating that he was worried that she was becoming unhinged. She noticed certain friends looking at her strangely, but did not know why. The unexplained change in her friends' behavior estranged her from them. Another story, Jacob told members of their tight-knit religious community that Hannah was behaving immodestly and neglecting their children. When she tried to leave him, their community shunned her and fought on behalf of her husband's bid for child custody. If you can learn about these things and recognize them while they're happening to you, that's one way out. But I want to remind everyone to be extra, extra careful when you try to work your way out of a domestic abuse situation. Often being found out can lead to very negative consequences. And on that note, I need to bid a fond farewell to my awesome guest, Jey Rajaraman, Chief Counsel for the Family Representation Project, Legal Services of New Jersey. We learned a lot, Jey. Thank you. And people have to know to go to lsnj.org if they find themselves in that situation. Thanks to our producer, Robin, to our engineer, Robin and Ruben. Music provided by Angel Fire. See you next week, October 19th, when we'll have Angela Quijada Banks, author of the Black Foster Youth Handbook. Stay healthy, everybody. Wear a mask. Let's make this week the best week ever. Thank you and good night.